Hey, welcome to Audio Punch. Chris Henry here, and today we're going to talk about removing plosives from your recorded audio. So, a plosive or a pop is what happens when you're talking in your microphone and a consonant like a P or a B or a T, anything that expels air from your mouth to pronounce it, hits the microphone directly head on, and it creates this ugly sound that sounds like
pop, pop, painful.
that, only not over and over again. And it's ugly. And sometimes, especially if you're doing an audio drama or a really important part of an interview or an audio book, you don't want to have those. There are instances, if it's a chat show, you can deal with some plosives. But if you're here watching this video, then you want them gone. So I'm going to show you how to get rid of them when they show up in your recording. But even more importantly, we're going to come back at the second half and we're going to talk about how to record so that you don't get them. Because as with many things that happen in audio editing, the way to fix it is to record it better. Lots of questions that I get from folks about how to fix problems can more realistically be answered by don't have those problems. Record so that you don't have those problems. Get it right at the source is a way a lot of people talk about it. So we'll also talk about that. There are some really quick and easy things to do if you don't have a budget to get new pop filters or new equipment or something. There's still ways you can position your mic and talk into the microphone that you have with the equipment that you already have in order to prevent these sorts of things from happening, or at least reduce the likelihood that they will. So to begin, let's get right into editing the plosives, and we're going to transition into headphone land nowish. Okay, and now here we are in headphone land, and I have a pre-recorded file that contains a whole bunch of plosives coming from the letter P. So let's give that a quick listen, and then I'll show you how I would go about getting rid of those, or more realistically, making them not quite as bad.
This sentence contains plosives, pops, and positively painful punchy parts.
Okay, so there's a lot of them in there, which is not necessarily common, but also if you're recording without a pop filter, or you're too close to the mic, or you haven't done anything else to prevent these things from happening in the recording, you're going to have a lot, especially if you're making a podcast and you've got half an hour and a half of audio. There's going to be a lot of these. There could easily be hundreds. And if you get really fast at them, it's still going to add an hour of editing time to your final product. So ultimately, you want to record so that you don't get these. But if you do get one, and you're bound to get one, even the most perfect recording setup, you're going to get one every once in a while. It's going to be a really good take of a performance or a really good bit of interview that you don't want to lose. And so at that point, it becomes prudent to clean it up as best you can so that you can so that you can keep what was good without sacrificing its quality by leaving a recording mistake in. So let's start with this one right here. And as time goes on, you'll develop a sense. I can tell just by looking at this that that's one of the plosives. That's the beginning of a word.
Painful.
And it is painful. So you can see here where the air hit the microphone pretty hard and created it, even clipped, right? Whenever you see in the waveform, it goes up and then makes a sharp turn. That's clipping. It means, and it's not clipping at the recorder or at your audio interface. This is actually clipping in the mic. The diaphragm, the thing that's moving, that's creating the electrical signals that create the sound, it couldn't move any further back. You think of it like if you're pushing into a piece of rubber, there's a point where you can't push into it any further. That's sort of what's happening here. That's what we're looking at. This is clipping at the recording hardware, which is what happens when you have a plosive. It's just too much energy and the microphone can't handle it. So what you end up with is this really kind of disgusting, ugly sound, right? We don't like that. The quick and easy trick that I start with, because sometimes certain sounds, the tricks that you have won't work and you have to play with it. But what usually works is the first thing you want to do is turn it down by about 20 dB. I'm going to separate it out so that I'm not doing anything to the regions or to the sound on either side of it. In Pro Tools, You can select it and hold Control and Shift and just scroll your mouse over it. That'll turn it down or up if you wanted it to. Reaper has a similar capability. I think Logic might now, maybe GarageBand. One way or another, though, your DAW will have a way to select a little bit of audio and turn it down. You might have to use automation, which we will probably cover in a different video. But however your DAW can do it, you want to select this shape, the plosive, which you can see here, especially when we zoom out. It's really obvious at the beginning of the word there. It's just a big pa. We want to select that and we want to turn it down kind of a lot, maybe 20 decibels, 20, 21 decibels. And the reason for that is because there's still consonant information there. It's just, it was too much. There was too much air involved as well. And then the next thing I do is, after I turn it down, is I will sort of cut it in half. And if you can get it somewhere where the waveform is rising above the line, it's going to sound more natural. So you don't want to start in the middle of one of those curves. There are reasons for that, but basically, if you're cutting it, you want to cut your waveform so that it is natural, sort of at the beginning of a curve. And it's turned all the way down. I was just zooming in there. I wasn't turning anything up or down. I was just zooming in. Anyway. And then the last trick is to do a little bit of a fade in on that. All of what we're doing is designed to fix the waveform so that it ends up sounding like it was recorded properly. A normal P sound isn't going to have that big blast of air. It's going to just be a little bit of a huh. So we're trying to turn what we recorded into huh. And crossfading, that's another one. It's different from editor to editor, from DAW to DAW. There's going to be a way to add one. There's going to be a way to adjust the timing. And you can see what I did here was, if you recall, we turned it down, we cut it in half, and then I added a fade that took up most of it. We want it to kind of come in a little bit gradually. You know, granted, we're dealing with less than a 20th of a second here. So now let's listen to the word painful again.
Painful, punchy parts.
There's a lot less of that blah, right? It's going to sound a little weird. Those are really bad plosives that I recorded, and I did them that way on purpose. It's not going to sound like it wasn't recorded that way, but in the middle of a sentence, in the middle, especially if you have some music playing underneath it or something like that, if you're doing like an audio drama or something other than a basic interview, the unnatural nature of it is going to be sort of swallowed up by the content, the quality of the content. Nobody's listening to hear how many plosives you edited out really well, right? Your goal as the editor is to just make it easier to listen to what was recorded, and removing those big distracting hits is one way to do it. Now, as I said before, the way to fix these is to not record them. Get a pop filter, use good mic technique, encourage your other co-hosts and guests to use proper mic technique. You can give them a quick primer. We'll do a video on that later. But the quickest way to fix this is to not have the problem at all. These tricks are for what happens when, despite your best efforts, you still got one that slipped through at a point where it just doesn't feel right to leave it in. And so we're going to come here and fix the rest of them real quick, and then we'll come back and listen to the whole sentence as compared to the original. Okay, I think I got them all. So let's give a quick listen and make sure that everything sounds the way I think it was going to sound.
This sentence contains plosives, hops, and positively painful, punchy parts.
Okay, so I got most of them, but I do think that I went a little bit overboard on them. So all I'm going to do is turn them back up and let a little bit more of them through and see how that sounds. And you can do that either by revealing more of the sound for it to play, by adjusting the curve of your fade, which many DAWs will allow you to do. If you're automating, just change the automation curve, um, or turn it up a little bit more, just as simple as that. And now let's listen one more time.
This sentence contains plosives, pops, and positively painful, punchy parts.
So there are some that are still a little bit swallowed, as in painful, but we also heard early on that your choice there is to have that beginning consonant swallowed a little bit or hear the plosive. And if your goal is to edit the plosive out, you've kind of already answered that question for yourself. Part of the editorial challenge is balancing the difference between the two. And I'm sure if I really cared about this, if this was, a really dramatic moment in a story or a really like poignant thing that a guest was saying during an interview, I would spend even more time on these and get them sounding perfect, even going so far as to find examples of the consonant, in this case a P, from earlier that don't have a plosive and copying them and stitching them into the beginning of these words. Like you can get really granular, but if you're recording without a pop filter, if you recorded too close to the mic, you're going to have hundreds, if not thousands of these in a couple hours of audio. And you don't really want to do what I just did 400 times for a single episode of your show or a single instance of your short or your video. So it's a band-aid. It's definitely a way you can mask a mistake that was made in recording, but make no mistake that when you end up with significant numbers of plosives, there was a mistake in the recording process. If you have one or two here and there, that's normal. Don't worry about that. That's where these tricks come in. But if you find that you have several, that you have lots, you're going to want to revisit your recording process next time. That's all there is to it. All right, so there's a couple of tricks to get rid of plosives that make it into your recording, and they're not perfect, and I went through them a little bit faster than I might have if this were in, again, some sort of pivotal scene in Crit Squad or an interview, or if I was editing an audiobook or something. You kind of want to decide when it's worth editing them out and when you should just leave them in there. Sometimes I'll let them slide. I'll hear it and I'll think, that's not great, but it's okay. Other times, though, you really want a moment to be perfect. And that's when it's worth spending a little bit of extra time getting through, especially if you're making a podcast or videos or something that you got to put out every week. At a certain point, you kind of have to accept the mistakes that you made. And you can spend a lot of time trying to fix them. And that can do a lot of good in the right moments, but also, don't beat yourself up too much. Just improve. So, recording processes, though. So, I'm going to show you guys something right now, which is the mic that I'm recording in. It's going to get loud for a second. There we go. It's an RE320, which is not a cheap mic, but not super expensive. It's about $300 and some dollars. It's a really good microphone. And you'll also notice this. This is a pop filter. What this does is it blocks air but lets sound through, so to speak. Gusts of air will be caught in it. And gusts of air will get, or bursts of air will get caught in the pop filter, and they won't make it all the way to the mic, and it'll help prevent those ultra sharp, hardware clipping issues that are the core of what makes a plosive sound bad when it pops into the microphone. And you'll notice that I'm saying all sorts of P's right now: pop, plant, pottery, pornography. See, nothing. Just sounds like the words. A pop filter is your friend. You want the pop filter to be an inch or two away from the microphone, and you want your face to be another 6 to 8 inches away from that. And that will solve all but the worst examples of those problems. If you have an actor or an interview subject, or if you yourself get really exuberant, you can still make air go through that enough to hit the mic. But that's the quickest way to do it. Now, pop filters aren't expensive. You can get them for $15, $25. I mean, you can spend $400 on one if you want, but I don't recommend it. That being said, especially if you're just starting out, you spend a bunch of money on microphones and recording equipment and cables and stands and another $50 to get a pair of pop filters might be a little too much, or you forgot to pack them, or whatever. There's a million reasons why you might not have one. In which case, there is also a solution, which is this. The solution that we're looking at is don't speak directly into the microphone. Don't put it directly in front of your face. Now, that's one of the most reliable ways to get good audio, but it's also one of the most reliable ways to get the air from your mouth to hit the dead center of the diaphragm of that microphone, which creates the problem that this whole video is about. So instead of doing this, instead of talking right into the microphone, you want to pull the microphone off to the side and talk past it. Now, it's still pointed at your mouth, and it's still going to be getting almost the full brunt of your voice and your chest and your air support and all of that. But if you go, puh, that air goes this way. It doesn't hit the microphone. So the microphone still gets the P, the beginning of the word, or the B, or the T, or the M, or whatever consonant you happen to be saying while expelling a little bit of extra air. But it's not going to hit the diaphragm of the microphone directly the way that it would if the microphone was here. So if you don't have a pop filter, you want to take the microphone and put it at a 45-degree angle off of your face or your guest's face. A really common thing if you have desk stands is you want to put it, down, pointed up at a 45-degree angle. It's still pointed at your mouth, but you're far less likely to expel air directly into it, creating this problem that we just spent 10 minutes fixing. One other thing to consider, though, when you are doing that is your speakers turning their heads back and forth will affect the volume of their voice more. Because if you have the mic here and I turn my head this way, I'm no longer talking into the microphone. And if I turn it this way, I'm talking directly into it. So the way that sounds is here. We're going to pull my mic up again. And let's pretend I'm talking across it this way. We'll even get the pop filter out of the way so you can still see my big dumb face. If I'm talking across it this way, it sounds almost exactly the same, right? But as I'm talking, listen to what happens as I turn my head over this way versus when I turn my head this way. It changes ever so slightly. It's not bad, but again, if you're then following this up with compression and denoising and stuff like that, you're going to hear those differences in volume magnified. So it's just something to keep track of, a really good way to make sure that you mitigate that if you're doing like an interview or something. So let's say you're sitting across from your guest. You want to put the microphone in such a position that they have to face the right way to look at you. And then you put your microphone in a position that means you have to face the right way to see them. And so that way you're making eye contact, you're being, a good interviewer or a good scene partner or a good director, whatever the scenario that you're recording in. You've just set up the table so that good mic technique is enforced without people having to think about it over much. So we're going to put this back. And that's it. That's Plosives. Some tips for recording so that you don't have them. Any questions you have, leave them in the comments below, and I will endeavor to answer them to the best of my abilities. Thanks for watching Audio Punch. Feel free to peruse whatever videos might exist in addition to this one, and don't worry so much about individual mistakes that you make during recording or editing. If you make a mistake in recording, you can always fix it in editing. If you make a mistake in editing, you've already released it, so no one cares anymore. You are your own worst critic, but you are also better than you think you are.